Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexander van der Putten. I'm with the AIFC, where I'm currently the chairman of the Academic Council. Let me first mention a few administrative points. First of all, on the back of your badge, there is a QR code for Telegram, where you can basically follow us, and also you see the entire calendar here as well. You have probably also a physical calendar as part of it, but the QR code, for those that like technology, works, of course, very well. A few words about our sponsors who are allowing us to have this event every single year. In particular, a big thank you to Visa, who has been a sponsor from the very beginning, Freedom Holding Corp, but also ITS companies. For reasons of fire safety, we're in the Al Farabi Hall, and you probably have noticed where you entered, those are the ways actually to the left and the right to vacate the room in case of an emergency. We haven't planned a fire alarm, so if you hear an alarm, that basically means it's something genuine. Allow me now to introduce our panelists. So today, we're going to be talking about the use of immersive technology in education, but also in talent development. It's not just in higher education, but obviously there will be a strong focus on higher education. So we have Alejandro Amenero. He's Director of Innovation at IE University. Then we have Miraz Daulinov. He's sitting on my left-hand side here. He's the president of Narcos University, located in Almaty. They have a brand new campus. So if you're in the neighborhood, please go and visit it. Previously, Miraz was a Deputy Minister of Education, located here in Astana. We also have Dr. Vanya Garay. He is Director of Research and Reader in Design at Brunel University in London. In his case, it's 7 a.m. in the morning. In the case of our friends in Madrid, and let me now introduce Casimiro Juanas. It's actually 8 a.m., so a little bit later, but he has, similar to me, he has one foot in academia and another foot in business. So on the one hand, he's head of learning and development, business area digital services at Ericsson. You probably all know Ericsson, a global technology company. But is also an adjunct professor and also the academic coordinator of the tech labs at IE Business School. And I happen to be a visiting professor at IE Business School as well. So I want to start with Casimiro. So the way we're going to do today's discussion is the following. I will start initially looking at talent development in business education. And then we're going to zoom in to the use cases in universities. And then afterwards, we're also going to look at inclusion. And this is one of the reasons why we invited Vanja, because he has focused by way of use of immersive technology to have access to education to those who otherwise would not have access. So let me start with Casimiro, and in particular, from his perspective as a business leader, not as an educational leader, and how companies, global tech companies like Ericsson, have made use of immersive technology. Very quickly, in the case you're not familiar with immersive technologies, you probably are familiar with these, I would refer to them as rather cumbersome glasses that you put in front of your face. Apple has just brought a new one out at a small cost of $3,500 US. I'm joking a little bit here with the small cost, of course. But these technologies are finding their ways in higher education, but also in business. And that's what we want to explore today. So Casimiro, you're on the big screen here, so everybody can see you. I don't know whether you can see our audience, probably not, but we definitely are interested in knowing what you have to say. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Alexander, and all the organization for inviting us to share some of our experiences and some of the things that we are doing. And we are definitely using immersive technologies for a number of things. So I will explain you a couple of use cases that we are using. But it's also interesting because as Alexander mentioned, I have a double role and I can see both advantages. And usually for many years, there was in the majority of the technologies in university and academia, there was a lot more advancement and experimental access to things. But in the last years, what we have seen is that companies are not afraid to try and test and learn new things as well. They are not waiting for things to be totally ready. So part of our use within Ericsson has been as well to learn and to advance with its usage. So from that perspective, start with small use cases and with relevant stakeholders internally first and then expanding externally. It's always a great way to do. So let me start from the Ericsson perspective. And we really believe in the what we call the cyber physical continuum. There are many names for these other things in different companies, but basically it's thanks to different technologies, AR, VR for immersion, but also digital twins, AI and 5G um, to help to connect physical and digital worlds. And when it comes to education in particular, we have been using it internally for a number of cases and real solutions which are working. And we think it's a real step forward in education because the immersive capability allows you to use more senses, and that way it minimizes the risk of you not being in the class. It helps you to, I mean, we have, after the pandemic, we have all been connected online and we have used Teams and we have used many alternatives to connect remotely, but that has not minimized the risk, for example, for multitasking. Well, if you are in an immersive environment, you are fully engaged, and that's a huge difference. So this feeling of presence, this immersion, apart from avoiding the traveling and all of that, it brings a lot of opportunities for a company like Ericsson because we are multinational. We are in many different places. And as you mentioned, Alexander, we will talk later on about inclusion and non-discrimination. So that's a great use case as well. So one of our first use cases when using immersive technology was to help ourselves to build new things. We used it, for example, in our smart factory. We built a new smart factory in the US, and our experts were in Tallinn, in Estonia. And basically, they were connecting at all times with virtual and with augmented reality to learn how to organize, how to set it up, to discuss the different alternatives. So it was more education among experts that we were using at the very beginning. Then we started to think about other alternatives, and we build our own virtual reality environment. We don't like to call it multiverse because multiverse is a wider concept, but it's an VR enabled environment. And we started using it, some of us with Google's. They're cumbersome, they're not easy to use, they're heavy. So in a way, you can use it for limited number of time. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a much better than the alternative. We use it as well with a laptop, but you don't get the immersion opportunity. The good thing of the laptop is that it increases adoption, and adoption is the measure of good success in transformations. So what we are doing with that now is, for example, virtual education, virtual career fairs. We recently had one about cloud native, and that allows you to connect any expert, no matter where they are, with all the people that can help in projects, with anyone who is interested to know more about, in this case, cloud native. So our use for virtual career fairs has been extremely powerful to connect anyone, no matter where you are from a geography perspective. And the last one is something that I would like, if it's okay, to start with a video to present a little bit the idea, Alexander. So I will start with my computer.
You should be able to share your video. I was told a
Yes.
little bit earlier, so.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna share this one and I hope it works well.
We see it, yes.
So basically what you could see in the video is going one step farther. And after testing it internally with internal use cases, we are now sharing externally with our customers. And just to put you into context, whenever we deliver a new contract, there's a lot of learning that we have to deliver as well towards our external, well, customers, but also subcontractors or any other stakeholder that it's part of the contract. And the traditional approach for that has been to build studios in which you have physical presence of different people talking and sharing ideas and giving lectures. And that requires a huge investment in capex, in people, and to have perhaps premises that you don't use at all times. So during the pandemic, what we started using was, okay, let's invest in virtual studios. Let's invest in virtual studios where we have all our capabilities. And what we have done is start using, for example, 3D models of our products and put them online. We have started creating at scale capabilities to learn, and we have put that online as well in VR environments. And we have also created other more specific learning capabilities, but breaking the barriers of geography and location and even time, in the sense of not necessarily being in the same time zone. So from that perspective, we have expanded the scope of doing these things with our customers. And it's a good thing because then we basically, what we are doing, it's introducing this with our customers in Europe for the moment, but it's being expanded very quickly because it also helps our customers a lot to minimize a lot of their internal costs and maximize their capabilities. So in a way, it's, I would say, natural steps of internal learning and then external exposure of our capabilities for using VR. And definitely that is helping a lot the company and our customers to go further in learning and sharing what people need to know to deliver their work in a better way.
Thank you, Casimiro. So one of the interesting things is that you can use all your senses, right? And at the same time, it also allows for experimentation before you actually scale it, including outside of the organization. Let's now switch to higher education. because after all, we're all academics, and you probably also know that at AIFC, we have the BCPD, the Bureau of Continuous Professional Development, which is in essence a learning body. And what I would like to do now, and I'm going to first go to Alejandro, then Miras, Vanja, and then finish with Casimiro, because Casimiro had the opportunity to speak already. And I'm going to ask each of them about 2 minutes to talk about use cases in higher education, based on their own experience at the various universities or business schools that they're involved in. So let me start with Alejandro and the use cases of immersive technologies in higher education, in particular at IE University. Alejandro, please, the floor is yours. We see your image, but it doesn't seem to be live, and we cannot hear you. So let me wait until Alejandro is able to address us. Let me go to Miras first. So remember, Miras is the president of Narhos University in Almaty.
Alexander, thank you very much for, first of all, for invitation and taking part in this, very interesting session. For me, it's a really great opportunity to share with you some experience that I've learned, and gained when I was a vice minister. So before that, and when I just came to academia once again to Narhos University. So first of all, as we remember, so 2 years ago, so it was a pandemic time, even. And it was a high intensity time when when the states actually realized that the technologies can help us to actually to make education effective, since every university around the world and every school was closed. And I remember the time when it was really a tough period, when I just was informed by the government that in 1 week I have to change the offline education to online education for the whole country in 1 week. And for me, it was a really, big challenge, and for the whole team, since we've learned ELSA from different countries, and we actually exchange information with some other government that at that time, the most huge problem for that, it was for technical universities, because the labs they were closed, and it wasn't able, and the researchers actually, and the faculty and students, they were able to come to real labs. In that context, we discussed a lot with rectors, with presidents of universities in Kazakhstan, and what we did. So first of all, in every single week, so we organized 3 times per week sessions with all rectors in Kazakhstan. Some of rectors, they didn't like that, and they they said that we really know by ourselves what to do, but nevertheless, vast majority of rectors, they said, okay, so let's do that. And one of the problems was the accessibility to labs. And I remember that later we realized that some virtual labs actually exist in around the world, and we tried to share an experience in using that. And interesting that some technical universities in Kazakhstan, like Satpayev University, Kazakh British Technical University, and East Kazakhstan State University, Technical University, they actually tried to use that as an example how to use immersive technology in time of pandemic, when all labs actually are closed. In that context, we realized that this is a cost-effective learning, because we don't need to spend so much money to buy some, tools for labs. Second point, this is a very accessible education, since you don't need to go, to another part of the city and for 1 hour to the labs. However, what we realized later, so as an example, that for instance, in Kazakh National University in Al Farabi, I remember that it was a chemical labs that they used ELSA virtual labs, but on the other hand, when a student has this real reaction, of some issues, for students it was much more impressive, and they learned more effectively than in virtual, immersive technology. So in that context, what we allowed to use mixturely, virtual lab and the real lab as well by making some, of course, restrictions in the space. It was one of the examples. So we had some other examples when universities in time of pandemic, especially in Kazakhstan, use immersive technologies, actually not only virtual reality, but augmented reality as well. And frankly speaking, so after pandemic, so we said to all universities, we told the universities that even if pandemic actually came to end, so the university have to continue this practice. Why it's important? So first of all, in time of pandemic, we realized that this is effective. Secondly, we realized that the students now, especially generation of Z and even generation Alpha, this is new generation, they perceive more effectively the knowledge. So I mean that the technology education now challenging the teaching, a quality of teaching, challenging the quality of research. And we especially by development of AI, we are the most actually serious threat to education that we ever have been before. Even in time of pandemic, threat to education wasn't so much. Why? Because we understood that it was for such period of time. We didn't know it will be 4 years, 2 years, or 1 semester, 2 semesters. But now we understand that AI, for instance, and the technologies, they came to us, and this is a part of our real life. So in that context, we have to actually implement it in learning and in teaching. Another example from university that I represent now. So when we realized that this is a really interesting issue for students, and we have a separate IT school, so that's why IT school actually provides for all students, not only IT students, but all students. First of all, 2 issues. The first issue, this is a 3D modeling, and another graphics. And interesting that we've made research that actually show us that we have strong interlinks between graphics, computer graphic, and critical thinking, critical thinking itself. So we didn't know about that. We've thought before that critical thinking can be developed by debates, moot courts, etc. But we didn't know that critical thinking can be developed by graphics, In that context, when we use virtual reality or augmented reality, so it can develop critical thinking much more faster than we can do that in normal real life. In that context, we also use virtual reality in research. So for instance, we have some research institute in Narcos that they make some computer modeling. Or for instance, we have a feature capture model that the UN recently, European Commission for UN recognized as one of the best practice in the world. That when we actually plant trees according to some computer model, but this computer model is a 5D model, when you realize what kind of elements in the earth can be actually captured by trees. And this is very effective in respect of that you don't need to spend so much money to plant of trees. And secondly, you understand that every tree is effective because we realized that after implementing this model, for instance, in Altın Elmas company, this is gold company, the gold mining company. So the effective of this feature capture it's 87%. So in that context, so this is some only examples how we try to use immersive technology in Kazakhstan and especially in our university. But on the other hand, I could say only 2 points in the end. So the first point that the AI is the most serious threat to education, and only we can manage that, human beings now, and of course universities in the sense of the higher education. Secondly, technologies came to us and we have to use that and we have to give that. So for instance, we give Python as a second language and normally to all students at Narcos. We don't actually give Python only to IT students, to all students. This is obligatory for all students. And third point, that the students are really different from those who's actually, from students who studied even 5 years before. So generation Alpha and generation Z actually are challenging the quality of teaching, challenging the education, And we have to make changes, first of all, in our minds, and secondly, in the ways how we teach and how we learn.
Thank you, Miras. I'm not going to try to summarize, but because it would be too long. But there's some interesting parallels that I also find with what Kazimira was saying. Because when you're using immersive and augmented technology, for example, by combining images, it also stimulates creative thinking. So again, it's the element of that it appeals to multiple senses, and that actually allows the acceleration of the development of people as well. But also interestingly is that when there is a crisis, it also creates an opportunity. COVID-19 is a very good example. And many universities, but also businesses, accelerated the adoption of technology as well, even when these technologies were not necessarily mature. So some very interesting perspectives here. And I'm happy that actually the technologies are staying, because now that the pandemic is over, because as Miras mentioned, if you don't adopt technologies, if you're not leapfrogging, then it could actually turn into a threat as well. So that brings me then to Alejandro, who's actually, I see now online. Hi, Alejandro. Remember that Alejandro is Director of Innovation at IE University. So it would be interesting to hear his perspective on the use cases. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Alexander. First of all, apologies for the delay. I don't know, everything that was going to go wrong went wrong this morning at home. But anyway, so for immersive technologies and AI here at the institution, we have working very intensively on the last years, especially on the VR part, where we had different areas of work. And for those regarding immersive, well, the first ones is the coding part, to learn how to code and design the immersive experiences. For that, we partnered up with the Unity, which is the standard for VR development and AR development. And we have courses and programs, especially in the bachelor programs, teaching Unity. And it turns out that one of the most used languages or coding languages in VR is C++. So we have to kind of dust C++ and started teaching it again, no? So that's been interesting on that side. And also Python, as I mentioned before, and other type of languages there. Also, designing on 3D brings up new opportunities on how to design this. Not only designing on for 3D using 2D, but also using 3D to design in 3D. This means using headsets to actually do the sketches to be able to see in 3D. So we have professors in the School of the Architecture and Design teaching how to design elements and 3D for 3D. For example, they get to design a vase or a lamp, and they go down to the Fab Lab and they print it, what they have designed on using the headsets. And that kind of speeds up the process. And students are also very thankful and to be exposed at this type of experiences. And the other side, the second one, would be the experience side, to be able to expose them to situations that are really hard to recreate. And this has many different examples. The first one, for example, content, like regular content, like documentaries, but in 3D. And we have several, like Anna Frank in Holland. That you live in in her apartment, and you're an African American traveling from Mississippi to through the Mississippi from St. Louis to Missouri to New Orleans, and then how hard it was for them to travel in the 1900s. And you place the students in those kind of situations, and that creates an emotional link to the situation, and they get to experience it in another way. Theoretically, that makes the learning last longer because it creates an emotional link, and that's also being used. The other one is our own VR methodologies that we have developed, and this is very simple, but it's just to complement the regular case study, and you have a VR experience, a piece that they can consume whether in campus or they can loan the headsets. And the experience Eye in the Storm, for example, which is a case that we place you inside of Hurricane 5 category, devastating your house in Florida or New Orleans. And on that sense, it's a 12-minute experience where they get to feel what's the closer to the actual situation. Then they go on to multimedia role play, where they have to make one is the mayor, the other one's a senator, the other one is a CEO of an energy company, and etc. And they have to come up with solutions, not to mitigate, not to change climate change, but just mitigate and have policies that make these situations better, no? So that's quite interesting. And then they go into the class and discuss. And that's bringing about more fruitful discussions. So that's one of the cases. We have one for marketing, and we're developing other two for decision making and leadership. That's quite interesting. And ethics for technology, and actually it's quite good. Also, we have collaborative spaces. We have been using two. One for blended programs where they get to go online, and instead of using Zoom to enter the class, they put on the headsets and they collaborate on a space. They have a classroom. It's like a journey. So instead of having just a classroom using a PowerPoint, the professor has a lot of tools to interact and create activities and have like a project-based type of class. So that's actually quite interesting. We have been using those in the Executive Master in Digital Transformation, and we're rolling out the second program. Actually started last week. It turns out that we had a mix, no, because people didn't last long on headsets because the first times it's quite uncomfortable. It gets hot. People get dizzy, etc. Right? So what has happened is we told them to use 20 minutes of VR and the rest finish in Zoom. Well, turns out they don't finish in Zoom. They stay on the headsets for an hour and 20 minutes, and that's actually quite interesting. The other things that we are doing is skills training. Skills training is quite...
30 seconds, please. 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Skills training is quite interesting, and we are using a couple of partners from the industry. And basically, what you do is teach the students a subject about public speaking, for example. They go on to loan the headsets, and they practice on a real case scenario like this one. And the audience is powered by ChatGPT. So they behave in a certain manner. One behaves very proactively, one is not interested, and that puts the situation for a student onto practice how to do the right speech. And the headsets will record the space, they will record how they're speaking, the intonation, where they're looking at, etc. So they get great data, the students get the data, and the professor can give them the pointers how to improve. So it's not only about the situation, it's also about the data they're gathering, and they get to improve based on data. So yeah, that's one of the things that we're doing here in the institution.
Great, thank you, Alejandro. One thing that I would like you to do with me when I'm at IE in Madrid in July is actually give me the experience like Mr. Armstrong, the first steps on the moon, and also swinging the golf bat and throwing that golf. Can you do that for me? That would be very nice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Give me that real experience.
Of course. Count on it.
Thank you. I have 100 witnesses here that you promised that you would do that.
Okay.
Let me now go to Vanya. We haven't heard from Vanya yet. Remember that Vanya is at Brunel University. He's also director of research and reader in design. You heard before that Alejandro talked about design as well. So we're going to go to Vanya, then Casimiro. We don't have a lot of time anymore, and I definitely want still to ask another question to Vanya later on after we heard about Casimiro from use cases in higher education. Vanya, you first.
Thank you. So I will probably focus on research projects which we do at university, some of which are related to what was already said by Alejandro. So I'm based in a design school. We teach students how to be product designers, and we are also running a small project which is looking into how to best kind of leverage the immersive technologies in supporting design education. That we are looking into this across kind of design process, something which the model of design process which we use here in the UK is called Double Diamond, which has 4 different stages. The first one is about understanding users. So we find that virtual reality is very useful when it comes to kind of building empathy and understanding who are you designing with. That means, like, for example, taking a trip in virtual reality to a village in Africa and understand how to design cooking utensils for women who operate kitchens in those quite kind of constrained conditions. Another very interesting example which students enjoy and like is sketching in 3D using software such as Gravity Sketch, and in particular doing that together. So there is this kind of collaboration aspect where people connect to the same environment through VR headset and then design together, share feedback immediately. And then finally, as you progress through the process, it goes into different types of evaluation stages where you can ask people who are far from you, and I think that's what Casimiro was talking about as well, to get some feedback on your products or product ideas before they are actually realized, and you have invested money into manufacturing or even just prototyping them, which is much more expensive than creating 3D models. So that would be using immersive technologies in design education. Another example where we were looking into a very different area was art education, and we had a project where we worked with the National Gallery to try to use augmented reality to bring classical art closer to very young children. So one of the outputs of that project was an AR game, which can be played in the National Gallery in London. And the game is called The Keeper of Paintings. And the idea was to sort of create a gamified environment in which children interact with painting classics by Andrei Russo and other great masters in the gallery. And as they kind of progress through the gallery, there are certain kind of clues and challenges they have to complete. But as they interact with those paintings, they actually learn about the background and the painters, what the painting represents, and so on. And I think that's another very important aspect of using immersive technologies in learning, the gamification, and kind of presenting things in a fun way, which would probably in a sort of a more formal way sound quite boring and not so interesting. And then finally, we have an ongoing project which is looking into inclusive design of immersive environments and how different types of interfaces and interactions can be made a little bit more inclusive for people with different disabilities. This is where we work with a number of partners, including Cambridge University and Royal National Institute for Blind People. And we have been doing lots of testing of different VR and AR content to understand what are the issues which people face across the disability spectrum and older age as well, and trying to find some solutions on how to kind of not necessarily redesign, but adapt those environments to make them more accessible. I can probably go on a bit more about talking on the benefits of immersive technologies for people with disabilities, which are, again, going across all kinds of different elements of daily life. The idea is to normally disability limits personal mobility. People are not able to move around as those who do not really have any issues. And immersive technology is a very interesting and useful way to bring life to them, as opposed to that people having to kind of move around to kind of engage with different things. And that in the context of learning can mean all kinds of different things. Traditional kind of formal education, but also things like simple things such as cognitive training for people who are older, and may have, for them it's quite useful to kind of keep engaged with certain cognitive activities, which can be presented through simple games they can play through a VR headset. Another thing which is very important is just kind of making life a little bit more exciting. When you're homebound, experiencing safari in Africa is quite an interesting break with the daily routine. So bite-sized learning and those experiences can be quite useful as well. I think that kind of covers the a range of different things which we are doing. We can probably have some questions later on as well. So back to you, Alexander.
Superb, and especially what I like there, two things is, first of all, the feedback that you get when you use immersive but also augmented technologies in design, and that leads actually to quality circles, but especially also your initiative with Cambridge University to give access and be more inclusive towards people with disabilities. I applaud that initiative. Thank you very much. So let me now go to Casimiro, and I may have mentioned that Casimiro is also the coordinator of the IE Tech Lab, and I happen to be one of the faculty members there. I don't know whether you wanted to talk about the Tech Lab, Casimiro, but what are some of the use cases as you see it in higher education, please?
Thank you so much. And here I would like to go back to some of the things that have already been mentioned, and they are very interesting. The need for change that was mentioned before, the speed when we have like a crisis that can become an opportunity, that was mentioned there in the room by you. The data that you can gather and the use cases that Alejandro mentioned that are super important as well to know what else you can do with that. And then from Vania, the capability to break barriers, physical, geographical, inclusive, and those are super important. So I think that we have to differentiate kind of two different scenarios. When we think about the Tech Lab, we have everyone in the same room, let's put it that way. So which are the use cases that we can use with the people in the same room? But another very interesting use case that we have is that a lot of the education that I've been mostly doing at IE is for blended programs with executive people that are totally distributed all around the world. So that's another very, very interesting use case. So when we think about the challenges, one of the challenge that we are facing, the majority of the organizations and everyone we talk about around is about content creation. Content it takes time, it's expensive, and you really need to make sure that it really makes a difference, because if you don't have a real difference in the experience, then people will lose the interest. When it comes to the executive education that I just mentioned, what we are thinking is perhaps the content doesn't have to be created, but just by the fact that people are dispersed, that is in itself an opportunity to create a different way of communicating, sharing, discussing, kind of an agora type of discussion for students. So that gives you some use cases of, okay, when people are remotely connected, how can you make them more physically or immersive connected thanks to technology? And the other ones, when you have people in the same room, like in the tech lab, and things that we have discussed as opportunities, and they are just in the thinking still, is more how can you, because when you're in the same room, you also need space, you need more physical space for people that they don't move around. And some of the Googles, they don't allow you to see what's near to you. So it can be risky from a physical perspective. But then we are thinking about alternatives to use it in a more collaborative space capabilities, because at the end of the day, people are close to you. So in how can you put them in an immersive environment where they can, well, collaborative or role-playing type of solutions where it makes a lot of sense, but then you have to create the content. So there are different use cases depending on your realities. And I think that here context matters a lot. And is, as with any other educational experience, and your capability to drive the experience itself. Those are the two things that we need to take into account.
Lovely. We have arrived pretty close to the end of this, and I would like to ask now each of the panelists, starting with Miraz, then Vanya, Alejandro, and then Casimiro, 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute, but please don't go over. Some concluding comments from your perspective, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as we realized today, as we see from the perspectives that they mentioned by all speakers, so first of all, virtual reality, immersive technology, actually this is the integral part of our life, and we can actually integrate it in education. In that context, we have to do that. And I really like, so different models exist, but I really like the model will, skill, and tool, when the will and skill incorporated in the start of art technology. So, and I think that when we speak about the technology, so what is it primarily, education or technologies? And I think that here, of course, the primary of education, but absolutely agree with some speakers that we have to implement technology in education, since without that we can be not effective, and the formal education has to be changed as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Miraz. Vanya, your 30 seconds, please.
So I think that the potential of immersive technologies in education and other walks of life is really great. I think I saw your comment on LinkedIn yesterday about the accessibility of devices and the way how things are used still being a bit of a barrier, and I agree with that. I think that the true potential will only be realized once we have simple to use devices which can be almost used in a simple way like the smartphones are used today. And we're slowly getting there. We saw the new headsets, just being released by Apple. But one of the important things I think is also the affordability, and the devices becoming cheaper and is more affordable for people, because that's still a very, very big issue with the majority of population, I think. So thank you.
Thank you. Alejandro?
So I think there are a couple things that are happening for the first time in history. Is that baby boomers and almost teenagers, 18 years old and 20 years old, are coming to the workspace together for the first time in history. And that for a baby boomer is very important to develop their social skills and keep up with technology. And for the new generations to do automatic words, processes type of things is a very common and was very important a few years ago. Now, to have social skills and computer and technological skills is even more important in these generations. And I think VR is an opportunity to bring up to speed these type of things, for both type of persons. And in combination with AI, the enhanced learning experience will be faster and better, enhance professors, enhance students to able to learn faster and produce better outcomes is quite an opportunity, a quite moment that we're living, because we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg in this type of technologies.
Thank you, Alejandro. Casimiro, your 30 seconds, please.
Yes, and I fully agree with this concept. Still starting, so we will see a lot more coming in the next years. But as of now, because of these challenges that we have been talking about, you still need to plan or to strategize how can you do it. And what we have seen is start with the specific use cases that really add value, that enable people to really capture the opportunity and live it. Then that will bring higher adoption, that will bring higher capabilities to the team to create new content. So these steps in your experimentation and then realizing the potential and sharing it, it's critical in this particular industry, in this particular technology. Because the challenge could be that people don't see the benefit and then they really focus on other things, and the potential is huge.
The potential is huge. I cannot agree more. We talk a lot about AI, and obviously these technologies are not mutually exclusive. But I've been overwhelmed today about the ideas and the use cases of immersive and augmented technologies. So please do thank and give a warm applause to our panelists. Thank you very much, and for your contributions, and also to our audience for attending. Bye-bye.